So we are looking into overcoming procrastination with the 6 types of procrastinators. Now, this is a really interesting one for me because over the course of the years, I've found that there are certain types of entrepreneurs that struggle with specific types of procrastination. And what is most interesting is seeing the challenges occur again and again and again. And I would be stupid if by this point I didn't see that there were certain patterns that people have, because we have this intention behavior gap, right? And let me explain what I mean by this. What this is where what we say we're going to do doesn't happen. Like, we don't follow through on what's been shared. So in order to move you forward on this, I wanted to be able to cover them one by one, and we can actually understand these different elements that are most important to you to move forward. So with that said, let's explain the first one. So in my first few years of business, I had a bit of a challenge in that I would study every day. I was working really hard. I was reading, and I was taking in as much information as possible because I thought the more I knew, the bigger impact I could have. But as the years went by, nothing much changed. I realized that I needed to do something different in order to move myself forward more sustainably. So I'd create content, I posted online, but the challenge is I was just doing it as safe as possible. I wouldn't really post content and spread it out to the world. I just enjoyed creating content. It was fun. Like, surely people would come to me. If you're someone who has done that before, where you have posted lots of content and you're expecting people to come to you too, be honest. I want you to put 100% in the chat. If that's you, I want you to put 100%, whereby you have done loads of things, but nothing's really happened as a result, right? And what I realized was this. I was building a beautiful house in the middle of nowhere. Growth Mindset Marketers, welcome on Instagram. And the challenge was this, right? I was attempting to do stuff, but I didn't really know the elements in order to move myself forward. I had this dreaming mentality. Diamond Lady Kristen, I'm glad that you guys can resonate with that. And the challenge was this. The first type of person here is a dreamer. Now, a dreamer is someone that doesn't believe they have to do anything in order to be successful, because you're great at what you do. And I genuinely was. When I first started out, I was looking into the skills, I was gaining them, I was helping people, but I was becoming frustrated and bored when I was doing tasks that didn't really relate to my calling, right? So if this is you and you feel like you too are a dreamer, I want you to type dreamer in the chat, okay? Because I want to see how many dreamers that I have here. So type dreamer in the chat if this was you. We'll then look into some actual ways to overcome this first type. So the first thing, I can see we've got Usha there as a dreamer. Anyone else? Or have I just got the one dreamer? One person's dreaming away. All right. Okay, there we go. We've got Joyce and Ella as well. Okay, we've got a few more dreamers joining the party here. Obviously, you guys were dreaming to begin with. Okay, so when it comes to dreaming, there is one strategy that I found absolutely game-changing that has helped me to move forward out of that dreaming mindset. And it's creating a realistic view of what has to happen for you to create the success you desire, right? You need a realistic view on what has to happen in order for you to create the success. So when I was first starting out in coaching, I thought I could just be a great coach and then people would come to me. Like, I genuinely thought that's how it worked. Like, I saw people do it. But the problem is this: if you don't have someone that has been there and done that, often we're guessing. And the challenge is that we perceive people that are very far ahead and we say, if I just copy them, then I guess everything will work out. I saw Tony Robbins, he was posting content on everything. I'll do the same. But the challenge is when you're comparing your square 0 to another person's square 50, you can't do the same things. You have to do a different set of sequences depending on where you first are. So I strongly recommend that you get yourself a mentor who is doing what you're currently doing, and they can give you insights on what has to happen in order to move you forward more sustainably. So as opposed to, for example, let's say you want to be a better football player, right? You go to a football person. If you want to be a better coach, there's people out there. Like, the element is to kind of find a mentor that's been there and done that to then enable you to move forward. And then you need to make a decision. Are you willing to do what needs to happen in order to move out of this dreaming state? And that's a question that only you can answer. Because for some people, they're saying, I want to be a coach, but I don't want to do marketing. And that's okay. But the truth is, it's going to be very challenging for you to overcome that. And it's better to just stop that dream there, because otherwise it will continue to be a dream and not move forward. So once you've created a realistic view, the second thing that you've got to be able to have is accountability. Accountability is key in order to move you forward. So you want to be able to have those realistic steps and that accountability to move you forward. So if you're enjoying this so far, I want you to put a share in the chat or the share on the live. And please do share this because I want to inspire as many people as we can with this content. So we've covered the dreamer. Right now, there's someone who's quite interesting, not interesting. Well, I'd say they're interesting. So it's the avoider, right? Now, this is the second kind of type that we run into. Now, this is actually when I was starting my business out in China. So for those of you who don't know, I started a business in China and I started to, once again, move things forward. So I mentioned about the content, I was doing stuff, and I started to run events. And I remember the first event that I ran, right? So I wanted people to be able to be impacted by what I do. So I said, look, if I post on WeChat, and WeChat is basically their equivalent of kind of Facebook out there, yeah, I'm sure people will come along, right? Yeah, that's my marketing. Yeah, it's done. That'll be easy, right? So what I did is I ran this event and I actually had 10 people arrive. I just posted it once. I had 10 people. The problem is that most of them didn't speak English, right? So I'm there like attempting to do this and it just wasn't happening. And why? Because I realized that I had this avoider type. And the avoider is where I would say, I don't want to do that. That's something that I don't want to be able to do. And that's not me. I'd say I'm not a marketer. And if that's you and you're someone that tends to avoid things, if you're avoiding your taxes, if you're avoiding your finances, if you are an avoider, I want you to type in avoider in the chat or an emoji that represents avoiding to you. Let's see if we've got many avoiders in the room. Now, whilst you guys do that, I can see Holly was fast there. You didn't avoid typing that. That was impressive. I did see that we've got Isha who mentioned a question about, can you be more than one type? That is a great question. If you just have one type, it's much easier to overcome. If you've got a couple, it can be more challenging. So at this point, I would say, if you feel like you've got a couple, what I'd say is just drop me a message on Instagram saying procrastination, once again on Instagram, and you need to DM me because I don't have the capacity, unfortunately, to DM you, otherwise I'm going to get blocked. And what I would suggest you do is just DM me procrastination and then I can explain some of the ways to overcome multiples. But at the moment, what I want you to do as best you can is to see the one that you struggle with most, okay? So we've mentioned that this next one was the avoider, right? We tend to avoid these different things. And I can see we've got a few avoiders here. I've got a few quite amusing faces and an avoider rarely, I'm sure. And Diamond says that she has them all, even though we've only done 2 so far. So there we go. All right, behave. I'm trying to concentrate. All right, so when it comes to an avoider, what actually happens? An avoider struggles to build a business or to move forward in their life because they are avoiding the important tasks that need to happen in order to move forward. A great example of this is a lot of people can become obsessed with content creation and they forget about how important marketing is. So what happens is they have a tendency to do a certain thing. Now, often there can be a root cause of this. Often for avoiders, I find imposter syndrome is one of the biggest challenges. I was doing a Clubhouse room literally a few hours ago, and one of the ladies there said that she has this imposter syndrome. So she has avoided launching everything. She's got about 50 different templates. She's doing all this stuff, but she's avoiding it because ultimately there's that imposter syndrome. Now, ultimately, what often happens is you're afraid of being revealed as inferior. So what happens is you tend to procrastinate on the tasks that aren't necessary. So you'll do everything else apart from the one thing that could be a real challenge for you. If this resonates with you, I want you to put a 100% in the chat because I want to know if this is resonating with the avoiders. If you're struggling with imposter syndrome, okay, Holly's like, Holly, you are on fire today, young lady. I just want to say that right now. Holly, I don't know how you're typing so quick, but it is insane. I've got some other people joining as well, the Holly crowd. So when it comes to overcoming the avoider, right? And let me just take a step back. The reason why I want you guys to engage in the chat is if I know that more people struggle with being an avoider, then I'll cover more strategies to help. So once again, the more you interact, the more I can basically give the content necessary in order to move you forward. So I can see we've got 3 on 100%. If you're an avoider, please do put 100% in the chat as well, so I can understand in order to move forward. One person mentions that they don't get imposter syndrome, which is great. Once again, there's lots of different elements here. I'm just kind of looking at the overall to help you move forward. So let me explain what I found has been amazing to help avoiders. The key here is going to be your time block. Okay, and I'll go through this quick because I don't think we've got too many avoiders in the room. Obviously, they're avoiding coming in. Oh, okay. And now they're here. Here comes Lolita and Samar. All right. So basically, what happens with this time block schedule is an avoider needs to be accountable, but in a slightly different way because they'll avoid it. Otherwise, unless it is in their schedule in a place where they've got high energy, you want to make sure that in order to follow through on what you're doing as an avoider, you need to put in your schedule when your energy is highest. Okay. So when your energy is highest, that's when you want to put these challenging tasks in. I'll give you a great example. When I was first setting up my business in China and I was doing my Chinese taxes, I cannot tell you how challenging it is reading Chinese, attempting to do it in Chinese. Like it was just, I just could not do it. And I procrastinated on it for weeks until I said, right, I'm going to get up in the morning at 6 a.m. and I'm just going to nail it. And for me, the morning time was best because that's when my energy is highest. Out of interest in the chat, when is your energy best to tackle the most challenging tasks? Is it morning, evening? Is it a time? Put that time in the chat. I'm just curious to see if we've got morning birds here, if we've got afternoon, evening, what kind of people we have here joining the conversation. So I've got some mid-mornings. I've got a lot of mornings. So the mornings are coming in quick and fast. 2 a.m. is probably a little early to me. Okay, so just notice here, we've got morning or late nights. Now, why is this important? Because once you understand that, the aim is to then use that leverage to enable you to move forward more sustainably. So one of the missing elements that I see time and time again from avoiders is they attempt to go into it without having a rhythm. What we want to be able to do is to create an anchor that enables you to move in to that state. So I was doing a group coaching session yesterday, and one of the things I mentioned is if you're going to be moving in, for example, to doing a bunch of content and it's something you've procrastinated on for a while, give yourself 15 minutes, go for a walk, reset yourself, and then do certain things to get you into the right state. Maybe it's a piece of music, maybe it's something there, but you want to move into a better state so you actually follow through. The biggest thing for avoiders is they just don't follow through on the things that need to happen. And you need to be able to understand exactly the first step. Too many avoiders avoid something because they attempt to tackle everything at once. Instead, you need to be able to break down that first step. So the key there is you're going to be able to put it into your schedule when your energy is highest. You're going to create that anchor beforehand so you know where to focus, and then just focus on the first step in order to move through the task and make it happen. I just want to say that you guys are absolutely on fire. Isha Lynn, I've got Brittany sharing all this in the chat. I just want to acknowledge you guys, loving the engagement today. You're absolutely 10 out of 10. So the next one here, and actually, if you are enjoying the conversation so far, let's just put a fire in the chat. Give me 1 fire if it's okay, 2 fires if it's on fire, and then 3 fires if it's insane. Just get the fiery heat of the conversation here. All right, so appreciate that, Brittany. Okay, I've got to work with Deborah. That's fine, Deborah. I'll work on it. And Joyce, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I appreciate all the fire that's being thrown here. I've got a fire. That is impressive, Isha. I think I've got a fire. I've got a stop sign, and I've got a fireman. That's just 10 out of 10. Yeah, cool. Okay, I need to stop reading this because I actually can't do this live when I'm giggling so much. Okay, behave. We're not going to call the fire department, Jennifer. That cracked me up. Okay, so next one. Let me give a different example. So this is a guy called Alex. He's a great client. He's been my friend for years. But what happened is he came to me, and I think this was about 2.5 years ago. And what happened is he said, Ben, my challenge is marketing. This is my biggest challenge. I see what you do online, and I'd love to be able to have a conversation. Now, I always get curious at this because I'm not a marketer. That's not what I do. But I'm open to a conversation. Let's have a chat. Now, literally within the first 5 minutes, I noticed that marketing was not his biggest challenge. Now, why do I say that? Because what was happening is he is a developer, right? A tech entrepreneur and someone who prides himself in getting things correct and likes things to be perfect. And what was happening is he was applying the same skills that made him an unbelievable developer and someone that was phenomenal at what he did in his work and attempting to apply it to a different area. Now, the challenge is suddenly he was struggling with perfectionism. Now, if this resonates, and if you are honest, you're a bit of a perfectionist, I want you to put perfect in the chat and spell it wrong. Okay, yeah, that's right. Put perfect in the chat and I want you to spell it wrong. We'll see how badly you spell it. And the reason why is because too often in our lives, perfectionism is actually one of the biggest reasons for procrastination. Now, why do I say that? Because what happens is we attempt to get everything perfect, then we procrastinate on all these different things because we feel we're not ready yet, and we stop moving things forward in a way that actually works. And I love how everyone has misspelled that 10 out of 10. If anyone does type perfect, you're going to be in trouble. Okay, so that's not an opportunity for you to do that. All right. So when it comes to the perfectionist type of procrastinator, this is where, once again, we're obsessed with making everything perfect, and it stops us from following through on tasks that matter most. Why? Because we're constantly in planning mode. Very often we're stuck in analysis paralysis that stops us moving forward sustainably. So we're avoiding executing on what needs to happen in order to move forward. So once again, there's often a core belief that I see here, and I'm curious if this resonates. If it does, put 100% in the chat. And it's this belief that if it isn't perfect, then you could be seen as a failure. Does that resonate with anyone in the chat? Put 100% if that's you, because very often the reason why we aren't moving forward is because we are deemed, oh, if someone were to perceive me different, hey, look, I'm not going to do that. And I can see for a lot of people, there's a lot of 100% there. So what happens is there's actually this fear and this belief of, if I cannot get this completely right and perfect, then suddenly I am deemed as a failure to other people. So what we want to be able to do is we have to be able to overcome this in a sustainable way. I can see there's a lot of 100% here. If you're enjoying this conversation, I want you to tag someone who also has a little bit of perfectionism and struggling with this in this, or share it on Clubhouse or share it in another room, because we want to be able to inspire people with this. So let's go on to the strategies to actually overcome the perfectionist side of things. Now, there's lots of rooms on perfectionism. I know we've done a lot of content, but I want to give you some of the quick fire things that I found have been a really great way to help reframe the experience that you're having. Because very often being a perfectionist, the challenge is actually the emotional experience that you're having. Most people look at procrastination as, I need to have more self-regulation and I need to get more schedule, like I need to schedule myself better. When the truth is, it's actually not that. It's actually emotionally regulating better. Because if you can emotionally regulate better, it allows you to move forward. Now, how do we do that? We actually take a step back and we change the meaning with which we're giving things. Why? Because the meaning is the prerequisite for the emotion that we experience. So what happens there? If I have a meaning that I'm associating with failure, if I fail, this is literally the worst thing that's going to happen, I'm going to be feeling awful. So I will avoid that feeling. Why? Because as humans, we do much more to avoid pain than we will ever do to move towards pleasure. So we need to make failure fun, right? Basically, in the easiest way to put this. And the way to do this is to reframe failure in a new way. And as opposed to using it as a failure, for me, I avoid the word failure completely because of the association that a lot of us have with it. So me, I consider it a learning opportunity, right? If I can learn from this, then I would consider it much better. So when we're looking into it as a learning opportunity, and moreover, a prerequisite for success, if I can see the more times I fail, the more times I learn, and it can actually help me move forward, and I genuinely believe that, that's going to be a fantastic way to actually move forward, right? So that's a very quick fire strategy from that standpoint to help that reframe. Now, out of interest, if anyone's got a good reframe of failure, feel free to put that in the chat, right? What could you reframe a failure as? For me, it's a learning opportunity. It could be a prerequisite for success. If anyone else has got a great reframe, please put that in the chat, because I want us to be able to engage and understand from other people's perspectives too. Now, the other element, and this is probably one of my favorite ones, and I found incredibly useful, is understanding that we have different roles to play, okay? Let me explain by this. When I was speaking to, for example, developers, they like everything to be perfect. There's a great example. There's a chap I'm working with at the moment called John, and he's unreal at what he does. And they do data science. Like, they need everything to be perfect. However, the challenge is when you apply that same thinking to another part of your business, that's where it's challenging. So if you can put on a different hat or play a different role, it's a really great way to suddenly shift not your entire identity, but to lean into a new role and play something different. Now, what's great about this is if you can do that and you can do it in a fun way, actually suddenly it becomes easier to follow through on. So let's say, for example, you are struggling with following through on a certain task because you want it to be perfect. How could you come up with a fun role to play in that? So it could be kind of a marketing guru. It could be, I don't know, the fun mistakes man. I don't know what that is for you, but basically you want to create a role and you lean into that. So for him, it was calling him the teacher and saying, you know, a teacher is there not to make everything right, but to show people that they can make mistakes along the way and move things forward more sustainably. So what we want to be able to do is to experiment with those different roles to move you forward in a way that really, really works. So we've covered 3 so far, right? We've mentioned the dreamer, the avoider, and the perfectionist. Please write down in the chat which one you think is the biggest one for you so far, so I get a feel for the room of where we're at. Okay, are you a perfectionist? Are you a dreamer? Are you a avoider? Generally speaking, where are you right now? Let's see. So we've got the perfectionist from Deborah. I've got Kwesi with a dreamer. I've got a perfectionist coming up. And we've got some and all of the above. I appreciate that very much. That definitely happens. Okay. So we've got a few different elements in the rooms. A lot of avoiders. Wow. I've got so many avoiders that didn't have decided not to avoid the room today. That's pretty impressive. And I've got a dream voider. Isha, that is quite intelligent. I'll give you that. Okay. So when it comes to these 3, once again, as I mentioned, if there's one, it can be so easy. If you feel like you need more resources, or if you want some extra help, feel free to message me once again, please, on Instagram, and just say procrastination. And I'm more than happy to kind of have that conversation, explain some of the different ways to overcome multiple ones if you feel like you're struggling with more than one. So with that said, let's go back to one of the moments that I remember so well. And for me, this is actually quite a traumatic moment for me. And it's really strange. So I'm actually in the Bund in Shanghai, and I'm in a place called Bar Rouge. And this is in 2016, probably around April time. What was happening is it was a networking event, and it was an opportunity for me to connect with some other leaders in just the industry, in the training industry, in the coaching industry. And as I was there, and I'm looking across the river, it's an amazing view. I can't even describe it. It's absolutely stunning. What was happening is, and you remember when we could meet people in person, right? It's kind of like that. And what was happening is I met this guy. And his name was Mike. He was in his 50s. And I was explaining what I was doing. And he said, yeah, Ben, you look really young. You know, I know I look quite young now, but I was really young back then. And he said, you shouldn't be going around trying to do the things right now yourself, right? You should do some corporate training. You should work with someone, and you should build yourself up from there. You should be working for someone else. You'll learn so much more than attempting to do something yourself. If you've ever had a moment in your life where someone has been that tornado for you, where they've kind of moved you down and they have shat on your dreams and they've attempted to bring you down, I want you to put a tornado or a twister in the chat. If that has ever happened to you, I want you to put that in. Because what happened after that made me realize one of the 4 types of procrastination. What was happening is that I started worrying for days. Am I doing the right thing? Am I heading in the right direction? And what happened is I started to procrastinate, and I started to second guess and doubt myself on talks, on coaching, on all these different elements. Like, I just could not figure out why I was procrastinating so much. And then I realized that there was this element here, and I appreciate everyone with their tornadoes. Obviously, we got a few that have experienced some serious volcanoes, tornadoes. So the element here was the worrier. Okay, not a warrior, not a warrior, a worrier. Okay, now what does this actually mean? This is where you worry if you can't succeed, right? You believe you aren't good enough, you aren't skilled enough, or it's not the right time, and there's this fear within you. And what happens is it creates a cycle where, once again, it's better not to start the task, because there's this fear of what happens if this goes wrong, and there's a destructive path of self-sabotage. And this was for me, this hit home like a train. I was, oh my God, I can't believe how badly this is impacting me. And what would happen is I'd start with a question. It would be, well, what would happen if this goes wrong? And then suddenly, literally for an hour, I would just go down this awful cycle. Brittany, I can definitely see that resonates with you. I really appreciate you sharing. And the challenge was, I would just go down these cycles. And maybe you guys have had this where you know you need to do something, but you say, well, what happens if this? What happens if that? What happens if that? And then we don't do it, right? And I remember when I was prepping for my TED Talk, right? I did TED Talk in Chinese. Trust me, that was scary as hell. And I felt myself procrastinating. Like, what happens if I mess up? What happens if they don't understand me? What happens if I say a word and they misinterpret it because I go ma instead of ma? Right, I know that sounds the same to you, but it's completely different in Chinese. Like, it's crazy. And I thought, oh my God, like, what happens? And the worrier, I realized, was like the biggest thing for me that was just holding me back. And what happened is that conversation that I had restarted the element in my mind that kept on going on and on and on and on and on. It was a huge challenge. So if you are a warrior, right? I say warrior. I feel like I'm saying warrior, but I don't want to say warrior. I want to say warrior. It's a difficult one for me. It's a tongue twister, right? So if you feel like you are the warrior, right? The warrior, bear with me. Do type that in the chat. Okay. If you feel like you're a warrior, do put that in the chat. And yes, you do need to become a warrior. Louise, absolutely love that. So I've got a few here because I know for me, this was a huge challenge that I experienced. So the first one is a very quick one, which I found has been absolutely game-changing to enable me to train day after day in order to get better and better and better. Now, how does this work? This is where you write down 3 wins every single day. Now, why do I say this? As humans, the prerequisite that we have is to look at things that are wrong. We have a negativity bias for the things that go wrong. And as a warrior, that's what you're looking out for. This is doing the opposite. And you're looking for the mini successes that you're having along your journey that can enable you to move forward more sustainably. So what we want to do here is to find out where these are and look for the mini successes, because where focus goes, energy flows. So that's something to build into your routine in order to actually get you up in a sustainable way. So that's something that is an absolutely game-changing thing. We build it into all of our planners. Make sure to have an element there where it's a reminder, so you're writing that down. Next is a daily power. Set yourself up for success the next day. You need to be able to have these affirmations and to move you into success cycles as opposed to downward spirals. I don't want to dive too much into this yet because I know I've been chatting quite a lot so far. But this is something that I covered in another one of these lives that we did. And it was about 8 ways to get unstuck. And I spoke in depth about removing downward spirals. So if you are a warrior and you feel like that's a challenge that you have, message me the number 8 and I'll send you the recording of that. Once again, please on Instagram, because Clubhouse sometimes has its own way of not allowing me to have so many conversations as I like with all of you guys. So please message me the number 8 and I'll send you the recording of that. But in essence, you want to be able to come up with a power question and it will do the opposite of the downward spirals that we experience, especially when we're worrying. So the aim there is to switch that, make that conversion so that as opposed to going on the downward spirals, you're going on the upward spirals and making sure that you can consistently do that to make you stay on track. So let's take a breath. How is everyone doing? Right, let's put an emoji in the chat. Let me check in. I'm going to grab a quick drink of, maybe I'll grab a drink of water. I want to just see how everyone's doing. Put an emoji in the chat to represent the experience that you're having so far. What kind of emojis have we got here? Let's have a bit of fun here. I think I can see Jay has just joined us on Instagram there. Put an emoji in the chat. I've got no emojis. Where's everyone gone? I thought we were on fire here. So I'll wait for those coming in. Okay. I've got Leslie coming in with one. I've got Yosa coming in with one. We've got a few different ones here. Let's rock and roll. Deborah, I've got some claps. I've got some suns. Okay, great. Here. Karen, I'm going to wink back at you. I like that. Okay, cool. So with that said, let's rock and roll with the next 2, and then we'll go on to Q&A. We are going to be wrapping up exactly half an hour's time. So I want to make sure we can get the elements that are most important for you. So this is a really, really interesting one, this next one. This is where, once again, I was inspired by someone else who I worked with. So there's a lady called Jubei, and she was running an education company that had 30 employees. And she spoke to me about everything she had on. She was a single mom, and she felt like she had imposter syndrome as well. She had so many things going on. She was doing leadership courses. She was looking into scuba diving. She was, what was the other thing? Scuba diving. She obviously had her daughter. And then she was running her business, wanting to set up another business. And at the same time, her current business was becoming very stagnant. And the challenge that she had is she had 12 revenue streams. Now you're saying, why is that a challenge? The challenge that I realized was this: 95% of her income was coming from just one source. And what happened is we needed to use that to funnel into other parts of the business. So what's happening is one stream was covering everything else. And I was asking her, like, what on earth is going on? Now, let me ask you, I want you to be honest in the chat here. And once again, we're going to put 100% here. If you're someone that tends to dabble in multiple projects, if you tend to dabble in multiple projects, I want you to put 100% in the chat right now. Let's see if that's you. Because what I find is this. What she was doing is she's something called a novelty explorer. And this is where you've heard of the shiny penny syndrome. Now, what does this mean? This is where you are searching for project after project after project. You probably have multiple projects on right now. I bet you're listening to this whilst doing something else. Be honest. I'm sure we've got some dabblers here, right? But in essence, this is actually a very interesting type of procrastination, because you wouldn't think it's procrastinating because you're productive. I actually did a post on this on my Instagram. Feel free to check it out. But what it was is this. It's the active form of procrastination, because what you're doing is you are actively going out of your way and doing multiple things, feeling that you're productive, giving yourself that boost of dopamine. But the truth is that you are distracting yourself and procrastinating on what really matters to you. And you're avoiding staying focused. And that can be absolutely detrimental to yourself. In fact, the more successful you become, the more challenges that you have, the worse this gets. And it can often be absolutely debilitating, especially as you move things forward. So the challenge is this. You'll have too many projects on. You've got the shiny penny syndrome. You're going to keep switching projects, and you're fueled by this rush of creating businesses. Now, if that's you, and we've got some dabblers, I want you to put a shiny penny in the chat. I want you to put a coin. If you can't find the coin, put some dollar signs or something like that, because most likely that is what you're doing. Now, there is an absolutely fire way to solve this, which has worked time after time after time with clients all over the world. And I'm really excited to be able to share this with you. Now, this one, I appreciate that. So this one is very simple. It's called the power year. Now, most people as a novelty explorer will attempt to look into things after things after things, and they'll go down these rabbit holes. So what we're going to do is we're going to look into a power year. And this element is the following. It's where you do a period of 3 months. And within that 3 months, you have a major focus, like you have a singular focus, like that is the focus for you to move forward. Now, with the example with Jubei, this is what we did. I said, look, 95% of your income is coming from one source. What would happen if you focused on that one thing just for 3 months? She said, well, I mean, we'd probably, double the business. I said, oh, do you think that could be a good idea to do? She was like, oh, maybe. I said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That sounds like a terrible idea. I used a bit of reverse psychology. We had a bit of fun. But ultimately, the power year was something really, really fascinating, because what it does is it hones in on 12 weeks. You get laser focused on what matters. And then when you have an idea, you're going to put it for 3 months' time. And you're going to do something with it. You're going to put it there, and you're going to explore that later down the line. This is one of the best things that you can do absolutely as a novelty explorer, because it forces you to stay accountable and focus on the things that matter most in order to move you forward. I'm telling you now, this is game changing. Make sure to implement that. Put a fire if that's something that you're going to do. I've got some shiny pennies there. Put a fire down if that is you. All right, so I'm going to move on, because I don't think I've got too many novelty explorers in the chat. I've got a couple, but not as many as needs be in order to cover some more on that. So let's go on to the last one. All right. Now, the last one is going to be pretty interesting for people here. All right. So this is, once again, someone that likes to take on multiple things, but a little bit different. Okay. So let me give you an example of Charlie. So Charlie was a client that I worked with. He was running 3 different businesses, and he would go through these cycles of working really, really hard to begin with, and then coasting. Then he'd have a deadline, and then he'd work really, really hard. And he would go through these phases of staying up late till like 4 a.m. and completing a task that he could have done 2 weeks ago, but he waits for the last moment. Okay. If you're someone who waits for the last moment and you tend to create lots of crises, right? I want you to put a roller coaster in the chat. Okay. A roller coaster in the chat, because this is definitely what it's like, whereby suddenly you're attempting to do all these different things and you're going on these roller coasters. Now, he would go through these boom and bust cycles, where what would happen is he'd only ever cover something that really mattered to him if there was a deadline. If there was no deadline, he wouldn't do it whatsoever. So what we wanted to be able to do is overcome this. Why? Because if you don't, it leads to burnout. And he met me in a place where he wasn't being consistent. He was overwhelmed, and his plate was absolutely spinning everywhere. And for him, he felt like he was butter spread over too much bread. Okay. If that relates to you and you feel like your butter spread over too much bread, I want you to put a bread emoji in the chat, because let's be honest, that has happened to many of us. Okay. A bread emoji in the chat. If that's you and you felt like you've just taken far too much on and you end up getting completely overwhelmed. Right? Now, just a reminder, if you feel like you do want some more support with this, please do message me on Instagram, just saying procrastination, and I'll get back to you after the live. I need you to message me because unfortunately, once again, last week, I couldn't get to everyone in the chat, and for that, I apologize. So with that said, let's look into who this is. This is the crisis creator. This is where you need pressure in order to start a task. Without urgency, you tend to focus on less important things. And this leads to these cycles of working incredibly hard and overworking, and then followed by lazy procrastination. So once again, if that's you, feel free to put that bread or that roller coaster in the chat so I know who we're talking to. It feels like we haven't got, once again, as many as to begin with. So I'm just going to fire on this very quick, and then we're going to go for a quick Q&A. So this is where an internal deadline is one of the best things that you need if you are a crisis creator. Internal deadlines allow you to create your own urgency by committing to deadlines and actually getting things done. Now, the biggest challenge for a lot of people here is they don't move forward in a way that works best for them because they don't commit to the internal deadlines that they have. The only way that this method is effective is if you choose to stick to those deadlines and move things forward. A key element here that I found really, really helpful is chunking. If you can chunk things down in a really, really sustainable way, it can allow you to move forward in a way that actually works. So make sure that you're chunking things down to enable you to move forward in a way that works for you long term. So we've covered a lot of different things. Let's do a quick recap on the 6 different types that we've covered so far, especially for those that are kind of just joining. So we spoke about the dreamer, right? The dreamer who believes they shouldn't have to do anything to be successful, and they're often frustrated and bored when they're not doing tasks that are linked to their calling. We have the avoider, and the avoider tends to avoid pretty much all the important tasks that they need to do in order to move the business forward. They get far too comfortable, and they tend to avoid and off-put tasks for as long as possible. We spoke about the perfectionist, when we are attempting to make things perfect in order to move forward, and we get stuck in analysis paralysis and planning mode. Then we've got the worrier, not the warrior, the worrier. And this is where that you worry that you won't succeed. You have these fears not being good enough. And ultimately you have these paths of self-sabotaging your own results because you're worrying, going down these self-sabotage cycles. We then have number 5, the novelty explorer. This is where you are constantly exploring new things. And this is the active form of procrastination that a lot of people struggle with because you're not actively doing what you need to in order to move forward. You're being active, but you're actually spreading your energy too sparse. You're being a shotgun instead of a sniper. And the last one is the crisis creator. And this is where you need pressure, obviously, in order to start a task, and you find you go through the roller coaster up and down and up and down and up and down. So with that said, we're gonna wrap up with the Q&A. So what I would like for you to do is please raise your hand in the chat. I'm going to be ending these lives. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you next time. And we're going to carry on